All right, everybody. This is kind of the first prep show for the Big Hornies podcast. And the Big Hornies podcast is dedicated to telling the stories of Montana anglers. And on the first of the week, probably on a Monday, we're going to be sharing the stories of Montana guides and outfitters, as well as tribal Montana guides and outfitters, which I am both. And I work with various tribal groups and tribal outfitters throughout the state. And I also am a licensed Montana fly fishing guide. And when I do work in the state of Montana, per the rules, I work with various outfitters. And the sponsoring outfitter for this podcast is Chris McCready out of the Big Fork area. First thing we're going to do is we're going to crack this cider. It's called Bedrock. Bedrock Mountain Cider, Wild Spruce Tips, Elderberry, handpicked, handmade by Western Cider, which I believe is in Missoula, Montana. And it says, in cahoots with Bedrock Sandals. Woo! Because I got to tell you, in my little studio here, under all the lights, it's hotter than fuck. And I've got the windows cracked. I don't have a fan going because I thought it would ruin the sound. And with the heat, with the lights and the heat, and then I know everybody right this time of year is just getting crushed by allergies, and so we're just going to deal. I assume after I have this and a few of these, I'll be sloppy as hell, but we're just going to work through it, and probably hot as fuck too. But oh well. What we're going to do on this podcast today is we are going to go over the questions that I have for Montana guides and outfitters. I think what I was saying before is that during the early week, I'm going to interview various guides and outfitters from the state of Montana and on various Indian tribal reservations, and we're going to tell their stories. I think it's important to get their stories down on tape. I think they're some interesting motherfuckers, and hopefully it'll give them a little bit of publicity in as well as they share our stories with them, so we can help fill up, their guide days. That would be a pretty cool thing. And then later in the week, I think we'll do a podcast where we kind of talk to some underground people, because there are people doing some really cool shit in this state. I don't know if you know this, but Montana is the fourth largest state. We are the northernmost state in the Rocky Mountains, which basically means we get a lot of snow. We are the headwaters for a lot of different river systems. And so we have a lot of fish, obviously, right? That's what we're known for. And so I think that it's important to me personally to have Montanans telling Montana stories. I think that's what's important. And I think that's why we're doing it. I don't know how well we're going to do it. I don't know. I'm not a professional podcaster. It's taken me a minute to get everything set up by, getting the mics and the laptops and the cameras and all that kind of stuff. And so here we go. The first thing I want to do is I want to give a shout out to my madre. She passed 3 days ago. She was 80 years old. She lived one hell of a life. She was the toughest street fighter you ever knew in your life, and she created a hell of a wake and a hell of a legacy behind her. She wasn't a drinker, but I have this bottle of George T. Stagg that I only break out for weddings and funerals, and so we are going to have a pull for my mom to start this off. And hopefully throughout this, we won't get too crazy. Anyway, so we're just going to jump right in. And the first question is where are you from and who is your family? Well, I'm a pretty lucky son of a gun. My mom was born and raised on the Salish Kootenai Indian Reservation, the Confederated Tribes, which is basically the reservation that spans between Missoula, Montana and Kalispell, Montana. And if you've ever been to Western Montana, then you know there's a place called Flathead Lake. And from Flathead Lake runs the Flathead River. And adjacent to the Interstate 93, there are the Mission Mountains. and you're talking about one of the most beautiful places on earth. And still to this day, even though we have a lot of encroachment here in Montana, uh, a place that it can be pretty wild. I mean, you don't have to go very far on this Indian reservation, which is my home Indian reservation, and um, find a grizzly bear or two. But we'll get into that. Uh, my father was from the Crow Indian Reservation. And many of you folks may know the Crow Indian Reservation because that's the home of the Bighorn River. Um, and that plays tremendously in my story. That's how we'll get to how we got to Bighornies. But my dad was a young man. My mom and dad met at Bozeman. My family were, you know, traditional Native people coming from the brokenness of being hunter gatherers for 200,000 years. And then within 100 years of the time my parents were born, in the 1940s, that whole hunter gatherer thing changed. I mean, can you imagine what that would have been like to um, be hunter gatherers for 200,000 years, you know? And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're, you know, driving a 49 Ford listening to Hank Williams. I mean, wow. And as you can imagine, that came with a lot of issues, social ills, that kind of thing, prejudice, all that kind of stuff. But my parents were fighters. And my mom and dad met at Bozeman at Montana State. Montana State and University of Montana play huge in my family's history. And they met at Bozeman in the 60s. They were people who were fighting for Native rights. And my dad became the third Native American attorney in the state of Montana. And my mom was a healthcare executive. And so I got the benefit of growing up on the Bighorn River, growing up on the Salish Kootenai Indian Reservation as a kid. And I got to be in those places when they were still very, very wild, still pretty incredible. Um, Question number 2 is, how did you start fishing? Well, I think this is important too. I think it's important to tell the story that I always tease guys who are like, I was dry or die from day one. Well, I wasn't. I had a Zebco, I had a red and white bobber, and I had a big fat worm that we took up to Mission Dam and tossed it into the lake, and at some point caught a fish. And I don't know what that did, but then I became kind of that classic, ADHD kid who's always trying to go fishing. And so we spent a lot of time with our babysitter, Leanne Matt, and she took us all over the Indian reservation while my dad was in law school and at the University of Montana. And we just fished every creek we could, and we fished all over the reservation. And, that's how I started at the age of 4 or 5. I always shit talk people who are nymphers, who bobber fish. But I was a bobber fisherman too, but it was just at the age of 4. Then we moved to Billings, Montana, because my dad was a Crow Indian and he wanted to set up his law practice close to his Indian reservation. He actually wanted to live on the res, but my mom was adamant that her kids grow up in off the reservation in white schools so that we could compete with non-Indian people. And that for my family that worked out pretty well. My sister became an attorney. She got her master's at the University of Montana. She got her master's in Tucson at University of Arizona. My brother became a Rhodes Scholar, and he was a philosophy major at the University of Montana. He went to NYU, MFA. He went to Oxford with his Rhodes Scholarship, and then he got a PhD at University of Chicago. And our little niece, who just had a baby within 72 hours of my mom passing, she went to Yale. And so that was her feeling was that we were going to grow up and we were going to be able to compete. And then, of course, there was me, the itinerant fly fishing guide. But you know what? We all have our path, right? Um, And so we moved to Billings, Montana, and there was a little creek outside of Billings called Pryor Creek. You'll have to excuse me, I'm sweating. And we went there one day and we kind of did the same old, same old. We had a bobber and we had a worm and we threw it in the creek and we caught a sucker. And then we took that sucker, as one will do, and we cubed it up and we put it on a hook. And then we caught a brown trout. And so my beginnings are worms, bobbers, cut bait, all of it. And then, we had been hearing these stories. I mean, I was probably 6 or 7 years old. This was in the mid 1970s. And we had been hearing these insane stories about the Bighorn River. And at the time, the Bighorn River was closed only to native people. There's a famous case called Montana USV, which is really harmed a lot of native Indian reservations, including in terms of their sovereignty. But there were fly fishermen who wanted to, fish this fabled river. And I was lucky enough that we went there when I was we went there in probably 1975 or 1976. It was still closed. We were the only ones on the river. I don't know if you've ever been part of those tiny mayflies that hit the Missouri River, the like cyclones or whatever the hell they're called. But you could walk over the backs of these fish when they were rising, when there was a hatch. It was absolutely incredible. We went there, we camped the first time we went there, my dad and I and my brother, and we were the only ones on the river, and we spent all day trying to fish, and we didn't catch anything. The next day, this native guy, Bernard Pease, showed up in a jet boat, and he said that over in Oregon, they used a simple rig where they kept the sinkers, which what we called them. We didn't call them weight back in the day. And we had a number 2 eagle claw hook with some sinkers, and he put the sinkers about a foot away, 18 inches away from the hook. And because there was so much moss in the river or weeds, it would allow the sinkers to sink, your hook to come up, and on that hook we put just a giant, bighorn meatball. We just put giant night crawlers on the end of that thing. And I remember within maybe 20 minutes to a half hour of Bernard showing up, my dad standing on the bank, 1976. My dad was an attorney, and he all of a sudden hooks into this like 4-pound rainbow. Giant male, single broad stripe down the side of him, big hook jaw. And I think of all of the memories of my father, that stands out, in the top 5 for sure. Over the course of the next, little bit afternoon, we probably hooked 30 fish that way. There was a time we would go down to the Bighorn River and we would fish night crawlers, of course. So, my beginnings are not, my beginnings are humble, and we would catch 30 fish an hour each. I mean, it was just that totally incredible. We knew nothing about fly fishing. This was the mid 70s. This was still a time when things were wild and woolly, and we were the only ones down there. And you would find the yellowtails would be down there, the Peases would be down there, Dean and Leroy Barnes would be down there, Bernard Pease, Bill Yellowtail, his brother Bob, who they called Numbnuts because he would wade, up to his waist in this super cold water because, of course, it was coming from the bottom of Yellowtail Dam. And it was a really, really special thing. Now, of course, as things happen in life, the Supreme Court case opened up the Bighorn, and I went from being this god on this river, fishing it by myself, to being some dirty Indian kid on the bank fishing worms when all of these endless fly fishermen would go by. And it was almost biblical in how I had been in paradise one minute and in the Exodus or, the next. I was on the outside looking in. I think the one joke I've always learned from all of this is that I didn't realize at the time that these guys who were going down in these boats, with their tweed jackets on and their like Sherlock Holmes hats and their pipes, that they were fishing basically a San Juan under a bobber. So that was, but that's how we go. That's how we go. That's how I got my humble beginnings into fly fishing. And then after that, I just kind of didn't want to fish the bighorn anymore. And I started, kind of quote unquote blue lining. I started looking for places to go in the mountains where I could fish in a way where I would find some solitude, because as most people know, the Bighorn is a very busy place, especially the upper 13 miles. And, but that's where I started. All right. Number 3. And then what was your progression into guiding, and any regrets? Any regrets? Regrets, like that kid has on his neck tattooed. Well, I went to Montana State, like my parents did. And after about 3 years, the administrators decided to um, send me a letter, an official letter, that said maybe I should take some time off. So I took a little time off, and luckily enough for me, I just found a line, a perfect line, and I somehow ended up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, to take my time off from college that I had been asked to take off. Spent a little bit too much time down in the Rockin' R, the old Rockin' R bar, back in the 80s, when we had quarter beers and Tanqueray and tonics for $1 on Tuesday nights. And, that was the good life way back when, in that sleepy little town of Bozeman, Montana. I mean, can you imagine what Bozeman, Montana was like in the fall of 1986? I mean, it made Freyberg College from Animal House look tame, but it was a pretty cool, pretty sleepy little place, as was Jackson Hole in 1988-89. I ended up in Jackson Hole in 1988-89, and I was a ski bum there for a few years. I'd grown up skiing in Red Lodge, skied at Bridger, skied at Big Sky, and then I ended up in Jackson in the late 80s skiing. And somebody talked me into buying a one-way ticket to Maui. And so he was a Scottish dude named Chugger with blonde dreadlocks, and we bought one-way tickets to Maui, and we ended up over there surfing for a season. And then I came back and I decided it was time for me to grow up. And so I became, quote unquote, a business person for many, many years. And I was dating somebody in Scottsdale, Arizona, and her 9-year-old niece died of cancer. And she was one of 18 people who died of cancer that Christmas at the Phoenix Children's Medical Center. And so I had some soul searching to do. The situation broke up my relationship with that lady, and I was kind of lost and all alone. And the only thing I had was that I had a niece growing up in Montana without a father, and that was the only thing I could hold on to at the time. And so I moved home back to Montana and watched her grow up. And I got really lucky because she grew up in a little Indian town on the reservation. She played every sport. She was in every club. We traveled constantly. We watched every game. We watched every event. She was amazing in musicals. And then she went to college, and I took her to college. I went out 6 weeks to the East Coast, and I camped out in a little campground on the Long Island Sound, excuse me, and dropped her off at school. And during that time, I had made some money, and so I was able to kind of take some time off when I was away. And I picked up a fly rod, and I started fishing. And I started fishing probably 100 days a year. And after about 10 years, I mean, this is going to kind of sound funny, but after about 10 years, I got kind of lonely. I mean, I was out there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, and my best friend is a total workaholic, and so he could fish with me on Friday evenings, and so I spent I just spent endless days out there fishing by myself. Uh, and I just got bored with being by myself all the time. And I thought, you know what? I had become a ski instructor at Big Mountain at Whitefish Mountain Resort. I had become a member of the adaptive group where we taught people how to sit ski who maybe are paralyzed or have had some sort of a back injury or something. And so I learned to become a ski instructor. And so I thought, you know what? Maybe I could be a fly fishing instructor too. And so that's how I got into it. And do I have any regrets? Of course. I've got things to do in my life. I don't have a lot of life left. I'm not super young anymore, and I've got shit to do. And fly fishing is a part of that, of course. And being a guide is absolutely a part of that because of the benefits it brings to me for sure. In terms of being outside all day long. But, I've got other things to do as a native man that are important as well in this world. All right, number 4. Sorry, I'll get to the story of these glasses in a second. What has been the hardest guiding season of your career, and did you almost quit? Okay. That's question number 4. So number 1 was where are you from and who are your family? Question number 2 was how did you start fishing? And number 3 is what was the progression into guiding and any regrets? And number 4 is what has been the hardest guiding season of your career and did it almost make you quit? The hardest guiding season for me, and I had heard a friend of mine who's a guide, and I think he told me he got 2 days his first year. I mean, if you know what it takes to get into guiding, I mean, you got to get a boat and you get your truck and you got all your gear and, you got to pay for your insurance and your licensing and all that kind of stuff. And the bro did 2 whole days. And I kind of got into a similar situation where I didn't know anybody. I got into guiding and I was trying to work with a good buddy of mine who was a tribal outfitter who had a sole permit on a tribal Indian reservation. I was trying to guide in Montana as well. I didn't know any Montana guides, and I just didn't have any business. And I leaned a little too heavy on trying to be a tribal outfitter instead of working in Montana. And as a result, I didn't have a lot of business. It put me in a place where I didn't have a lot of money coming in. And so I thought long and hard about going back into my old life of business stuff and making some money and making sure everybody at home was okay with everything, if you get my drift. All right. What what's a fish or a day on the water that you still think about years later? I kind of like that question. And I think the reason I like that question is because I think it's important to talk about progression. You know, when I started as a, when I was a gear angler, let's say, and so I've been all of it, like I said, I started with a red and white bobber and a worm and a Zebco, which I tend to find a lot of the hunters out there in the fly fishing world. That's how they started, you know? There's always these kind of dudes who have a knack for it. You find out if you ask them the question, they were the ones back, in the South gigging frogs or putting their arm in holes for big catfish and shit like that. You know what I mean? Um, but I started with the red and white bobber. Then I moved into no bobber, pretty high end, right? And then, I was one of those dark art check nymphers way back when, before check nymphing was cool. Um, and then I moved into gear. And once we got into gear, we got into lures, right? So we were throwing, rapalas, I guess is what they call them now. We called them rapalas. We were throwing rooster tails and crocodiles and meps and blue fox and, red and white spoons, red devils, that kind of thing. And, you get on the bighorn and you start throwing lures, man, you're going to move some fish and you're going to move some big fish. big rainbows, browns. We used to call them German browns back in the day, and we didn't measure them like we do today. I mean, now we're all about 20 inches or bigger with our browns. Of course, looking for something maybe 24 bigger. Those are some pretty monumental moments. Of course, 26 is and plus is pretty lifetime. My buddy Chris, Black Jesus, just hit a 31 this year, so that was pretty sick. But we used to measure them in terms of pounds. We would say something was 4 pounds or 2 pounds or 6 pounds, that kind of thing. But now we measure everything in length. And I I'm just gonna straight up say it. We used to kill a lot of fish. We used to give fish to the elders. And I used to have a rock. I would have a cooler full of 30 fish. And, I mean, the bighorn, produces, 8,000 fish per square mile or some shit like that. I mean, I know it's not quite that many, but it's pretty big. And we used to just like assembly line them with a big giant rock and knock them in the head and take them home, get them smoked, give them to the elders. And that's how we do. I mean, we try to stay as close to the land as possible. And that was important. And it was a good way to grow up. But as I got into fly fishing, I started developing habits. And one of my bad habits is that I was always a little bit cheap with tippet. And so I would end up with these leaders with just like these little scrawny pieces of tippet on them, right? And, as we go along as fly anglers, we're learning more and more and more about what is right. Unfortunately, there's too many guys on the internet who are trying to tell us what is right. There's all these Montana anglers out here who are putting in, 60 days a year out in the wilderness. And then we've got all these, kind of keyboard warriors who are telling us what's right and wrong. And we're out here learning what's right and wrong. I mean, I think we're learning more and more about what's cool when it comes to grip and grins, what's cool about keeping these fish wet, how much, how we should play them, whether we need, bigger rods to spend more time. I mean, when I grew up, everybody was throwing a 9'5" weight, and we're getting to a point more and more where, you know, these fish that we're chasing, if we're not on some pristine stream up in the mountains chasing 10-inch cutthroat, a lot of times we're chasing big pike and big bass and big carp and big browns. And, that's kind of big horny specialty is where we chase big browns. And we've had to learn over time that fighting those big fish on 4 and 5 weights that we would use up in the mountains just ain't cutting it. And it certainly is not good for the fish. I mean, it's better to get that fish in as soon as possible so that we can release it in a good way. Well, I caught a fish, a giant brown trout in the fall on a big giant white sex dungeon with a huge hook jaw. And I had a couple janky pieces of leader in my line. And I thought it would be cool because that hook was right in the corner of its mouth, I thought it would be cool to take a picture of that fish with that sex dungeon in his mouth. And of course, I hold the fish up to get the picture. It's a slate ass gray, like October day in Montana. And it does like 2 or 3 tail flaps, falls out of my fucking hands and swims away, breaks that janky ass leader and swims away with my sex dungeon. Now, before anybody like seriously critiques me, we all kill fish. We all put fucking hooks in the wrong places in those fish, and there's some of them die. We all know that. And I've learned lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson. And I've gotten many fights with people over those lessons, trying to teach them myself, trying to teach other Montanans to be a little bit more fish friendly. We're getting to the point where we're really pretty cool with these fish now, but it's been a long progression. But I do remember that brown trout is one of those fish that I will remember till the day I die, because it's always the ones that got away, right? Well, we can metaphorically as well, right? All right, we're moving on to page 2. What do you like to do in the off season? Places you go, other sports, species you chase. I am a in-season Montana fly angler. And what that means is I like to fish for them from approximately April through October. Um, I don't like to chase the browns in November because I know there's places where I can find them where they're not quite on their beds yet, but fuck it. It's not worth fucking harming them if that's approximately about where they're going to be. I don't ice fish. I don't fish over the winter. Um, I, I try to give myself a rest and I try to give the fish a rest. That's just what I do. Um, I know a lot of people who ice fish. I know a lot of people who like to go out and fish in the wintertime. That's just not my thing. I like to do other things. Like I said before, um, when I was talked into buying that one-way ticket to Maui to go learn to surf and windsurf in about 1990, 91, I fell in love with the islands and I fell in love with surfing. And I am still 30, 40 years later, the world's most okayest surfer on planet Earth. I, uh, I'm not very good, but I love it. And there's just something about being in the islands, something about drinking that coffee, something about your toes in the sand, something about being in that super salty ocean that I just absolutely love. I also love to ski and snowboard and teach skiing and snowboard. So those are my off-season pursuits and I hit them hard. I try to hit them as hard as I can. I try to get in, 30 to 60 days surfing and I try to get in 60 days of skiing every year. All right, excuse me, I got to itch my nose, take a drink of this cider. All right. And I don't chase other species. That's just not my thing. But I do chase, that's not to say I don't chase other species in Montana. I love to fish for carp. I love to fish for pike. Um, I don't find myself in positions to target rainbows, but there are certain everything in Montana is seasonal. You know, there are times in Montana on a lot of these rivers where big rainbows that hang out in 4 inches of crystal clear water will whore themselves out for a grasshopper or an October caddis. That ain't year round, but I'm not a nympher, and so like I said, I did that when I was 4. Um, but there are times when these fish will present themselves to you. And so there maybe is a 3-week window in the fall or in the late summer where I will try to chase rainbows with big foam. I do like to fish for cutthroat up in the mountains, on, a size 10 purple haze or something of that nature. That's always awesome. Um, and then, like I said, I like to chase carp. I like to chase pike for sure. We're learning this as we go in Montana. A lot of Montana, I don't know what the story is with climate change, but a lot of rivers in Montana are becoming warm water fisheries, and I'm warming up to bass. They're certainly fun. They're certainly aggressive, and they'll certainly put a bend in your rod. And so it's all that kind of stuff. And there's more to learn and there's more rivers to go to. Um, the seventh question is, how has living this close to the rivers and wild places changed the way you see the world? You know, when I was a young cat, the only thing that mattered to me was trying to figure out how to live the American dream. And to me, the American dream wasn't white picket fences, leave it to beaver stuff. It was Porsches, Rolexes, fancy loafers, you know, big McMansions, that kind of thing. And I thought that I like, the generation that I grew up with, you know, thought that that was the way to go. And I have learned the hard way many, 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 many times that my ancestral roots, my hunter-gatherer mind and body that has been generationally connected to this land for tens of thousands of years, it speaks louder if I just listen to it. And I know that may sound kind of highfalutin, but I'm a big believer that if you spend less time in traffic on an interstate or beltway somewhere listening to talk radio, and you spend more time in Montana, in the mountains, on the rivers, you'll hear the song of the universe. I didn't hear it at first. It actually took the death of that young lady of cancer in Arizona and a few other things that happened to me in my life to actually turn that way. But I have been lucky enough to live for sure for the last 20 years hearing that song the best I can. That doesn't mean I still don't. That doesn't mean I'm still not human, but it does mean that I get to spend so much damn time outside that I can hear the song. And the song is the same as my heartbeat. And I know that's going to sound like real native stuff, and maybe the flutes will start playing in the background and all that kind of stuff, but that's how I feel about it. Okay, any interesting animal encounters? Yeah. I mean, of course, I've run into all of them. I've run into, 50 plus black bears. I've been chased by a buffalo. I have bumped into mountain lions. I have seen wolves. I've almost stepped on rattlesnakes. I've, dealt with, endless ticks and mosquitoes. And one time I was walking just gingerly down the way to a river, and I ran into a ma grizz with two cubs, and she stood on her hind legs. Now, I've been in situations where I've been, you know, I've seen mountain lions. Scary. I've been super close to black bears, like within 30 feet, many, many, many times. Not as scary. But there was something in me when I bumped that sow, and she stood on her back legs, and I was probably 50 to 60 yards away. There was something in my amygdala, my primal nature, that said, run. What do they say you're supposed to do if you run into a grizzly? What do they say you're not supposed to do if you run into a grizzly? Yeah. I didn't play dead. I didn't freeze. I didn't slowly back up. I ran. And at the time I had some back issues, and so I was dragging a leg, and so I looked like Quasimodo running down the prairie, and there was nothing to protect me. There was one 6 foot by 6 foot by 6 foot Lake Missoula rock. And if you don't know about Lake Missoula and you don't know about the rocks, you should look that up. It's pretty cool. But there was one Lake Missoula rock that if I could climb up on it, maybe that would have saved my bacon. But I probably could have climbed up on that thing. And that fucking bear probably could have climbed on it just as fast as I could. Thank God she decided not to chase me. So that was there's a lot of that goes on around here. There's a lot of bears, a lot of everything. But why not have it any other way? I mean, it's like that's the connection. All right. Number 10. How many of your close personal friendships revolve around angling and nature sports? Give a shout out. I have two buddies who are college friends from Bozeman, Andy and Glenn. I have a cousin, baby Dennis, who lives in Billings, Montana. I have my family, and then every other motherfucker I know is either a skier or an angler or a surfer. That's it. That's my crew. Those are the people I text. Those are the people I talk to. That's my family. Those are the people that if any one of them is stuck in the middle of the mountain somewhere and it's 3 a.m., they call me. I'm up. I'm down the road. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about it. Those everything I do revolves around texting all of my crew, and a lot of them are clients, former clients, friends, fellow guides, fellow ski instructors, uh, friends who I've grown up with who are also anglers. And, all we do is talk about the weather. All we do is talk about the WIND. All we do is talk about the flows. Because we know, like, seasonally, things will change. Certain fish show up in April because they're hungry. You might be able to bump the biggest fish of your life in April. Certain bugs show up in May, you know. Things warm up, rivers warm up, fish get a little more excited. Certain things happen in June with the runoff, right? Certain things happen in July and August. Maybe there's more weeds on some rivers. Some rivers get too hot. Uh, then the hoppers show up. And then, of course, once the fall comes in, things get a little chilly. Fish try to put on the feed bag. And, there's always something to talk about. There's always a new thing, which is pretty fucking sweet, actually. I always I'm like, I got to go do this. I got to go do this. And I'm always thinking, like, I'm perpetually in a state of, I've always got to go do this because guess what? Snow's coming in. There's a pow day. Waves are coming in. It's time to go chase big brown trout, so pretty lucky to be connected to the earth that way. And I will say, I think the reason I feel so lucky is because right now in the world and in the United States, things are changing. They're changing for me less than most people because I was old by the time I got my first iPhone. I had lived many, many decades before the iPhone showed up. And so I do remember a world before that. And now I'm connected. I spend a lot of time out in nature and out in the universe. And so my life is not as dictated by that. That's not to say I don't doom scroll once in a while, because I certainly do. But it feels more like doom scrolling. It really does. It really feels like there's a real negative energy that comes off all of that stuff. And I think the positive energy is connected to Mother Nature. I really do. And so I feel pretty lucky that way. All right. So we're going to move into the second part of this thing. Okay. So those are the first 10 questions. First 10 questions revolve around asking the guides and outfitters who they are. This is that's the first part of the first 10. All right, I'm having a little sip of this whiskey. I thought actually probably, sip a little more, but I'm pacing myself pretty good. That's interesting. So in the cup is mellow corn. Have you heard of it? You know what they say, if you know, you know. It's made by Heaven Hill. It's bottle and bond, which means it's 4 years old. It's almost all corn. And it 4 years old, bottle and bond. It's got a government certificate. We better have one more pull off of this as we move on down the road. All right, we're moving into part 2. In part 2, what's important about part 2 is about learning about each guide's individual rivers that they like to fish and how they would fish them if they were taking out a client. And that's to teach the clients, to think about and know that this is this person's specialty, because we all kind of have our specialties. So number one question is, what river do you fish? Oh, wait. Shit. There was another question back here. And it was, okay, number 10 question on the first thing was, and how I'm reminded is these fucking glasses. And you'd think they work. I wouldn't have to be like, number 10 question is, as a human, what has been the most challenging thing you have had to deal with in your life? I think this is an important question because we're all human. The hardest thing I've ever had to deal with in my life was both of my parents having dementia and not knowing what to do to take care of them. I think your initial feeling is that you can take care of them and that you should take care of them. And if you don't, you fail them. My dad spent about a month in a care home, and I regret that. He had Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and I deeply regret putting him in that place because they mostly just kept him drugged up. When it was his time, he passed. And as Native people, we always say, ride over the mountains to the next camp. Don't look back. Don't get stuck in the in-between world. And my dad moved on. My mom, because of that experience, I kept her out of a home for probably a year to 18 months, probably a little bit longer than was probably wise, but that was the experience that I lived. And a lot of that fell on my shoulders. My sister has come in within the last couple months and helped. And we put my mom in a home, and she was there for 2 months, and she passed away in what I would say is a good way. And she was able to cross over. And I believe she has met up with my father in the next camp. About 2 years ago, I got really sick. I got COVID in my inner ear. And it dislodged my eyes from my brain from my ear, if you can fucking believe that. And I spent about 3 months sitting in a chair, rocking back and forth with motion sickness in the dark for about 10 hours a day. And it fucked me up real good. And it fucked up my eyes, and that's why I have these glasses. And then right after that, I found out that I had cancer on my tongue, which I got from HPV. Do yourself a favor, look that up. Yep, that's exactly how I got it. And that was tough. But nothing has been tougher than having to deal with my parents passing on. And so my heart, if you are going through that or have gone through that, my heart goes out to you. We all learn through the cycle of life. All right. We're going to move on to number 2, Act 2. What river do you fish the majority of the season? I think I like to fish. There's a couple of rivers on the reservations that I like to fish, but I think the one I want to talk about is the Missouri River, the Superstar River. I think that is a spectacular river. And let me repeat that if I'm talking about the Missouri River, that's in Montana. I have a Montana fly fishing guide's license. And when I fly fish over on the Missouri River, or if I were to take clients there, I work with Chris McCready. He's an outfitter in the state. But I just love that river. It has so much. It is so prolific. It's no different than a lot of the other tailwaters in the state. It has giant browns. It has giant rainbows. But I think at my stage in my life that it's okay to want to fish at a higher level. I think it's okay if you're an artist and you want to start and you start with finger paints when you're 5, right? And then maybe you progress, and by the time you're 12 or 13, you've got pencils, and maybe you've got charcoal, and maybe you start moving into acrylics and oils by the time you're in your early 20s, and you've learned to do your shapes and your body proportions and all that kind of stuff. And I think if you've been fishing for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, it's okay to want to do this sport at the highest possible level. And I think it's okay to want to have your clients and the people you fish with do it at the highest possible level. And as far as I'm concerned, the Missouri River is the Super Bowl. I mean, it's the place where you're going to find out how good an angler you are. I think there's a guide on there who his famous quote is, when people ask how good is the Missouri today, he'll say, as good as you are. And what that means is that it's a place where it's okay to spend time learning to cast. It's okay learning to spend time learning to hunt fish. And so for me, the Missouri River is the place where you can go and really expand who you are as an angler. That's not to say I haven't done hundreds of days on little creeks and little two-lane, I always call them little two-lane highway rivers. In Montana, we have so many of those. I have walked hundreds of miles of those rivers, more than I've ever floated any rivers in this state. And I find the Missouri River to be the place where if you want to progress to the angler that one day you can become, it allows you to do all of it. And the second question is, what are the species that you are chasing? I think I've already said before that I'm not much of a rainbow chaser, but I am a brown trout aficionado for sure. I just love, I actually saw something on the internets today where it said the average rainbow will eat 500 nymphs a day, where the average brown trout will eat 4 crayfish or something of that nature. And I'm a streamer angler. Probably, so most of the people who know me will know that 80%, 80 to 90% of the time we're throwing streamers, which are basically lures made out of materials. And we're using them with fly rods. And I have my own special thing that I believe you should do. I think you should use 7 weights at least. I think you should be using floating line at least. We'll get to that here in a minute. And I think you should be throwing certain bugs. And I think you should be throwing certain bugs in specific places. And so 80 to 90% of the time I'm throwing streamers, because I think that's how you chase big predatory fish. And I think that's the thing about brown trout, is brown trout are looking to eat other fish and crayfish and all sorts of other things, where rainbows are not as predatory. They're more in that foam line eating nymphs that are emerging. Brown trout are hunting. And so you can hunt a hunting fish, if that makes sense. You can use that fish's need to hunt in a way against it, so you can hunt it. And I think, if I've already mentioned this, I'm a hunter-gatherer from 200,000 years back. And so, hunting a hunting fish is something I'm definitely into. And so chasing big brown trout is my thing. And we like to do it mostly with streamers, but there are certain times a year, like I had said before about the rainbows, there are certain times a year where I always say they whore themselves out, because they do. They show themselves for big, fat foam bugs when they usually don't. And so I'm not going to, this is going to sound really bad, but I'm not going to disrespect those fish by nymphing for them. I'm going to go out mano-a-mano, and I'm going to get in their face, and I'm going to fight with them, either with a streamer or a big fat foam bug. And if they win, they win. If I win, I win. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I don't believe it's about the catching. I believe it's about the hunt. And the harder the hunt, I think the better. But that's just a certain personality. That's a certain style of belief. All right. Question number 3. Let's have another slip of this cider. What techniques do you use to chase them? All right. I already said that we're mostly streamer anglers. And we mostly, like I said, we use 7 and 8 weights. I prefer 8 weights. I think you should show up. If you're going to hunt buffalo, I think you should show up with your buffalo gun. This whole idea of kind of under gunning yourself, I think is bullshit. And as somebody who has sat in that fucking, that rower seat, mile after mile after mile, watching people who just almost get it there, like they're always like 6 inches out of the strike zone, right? And if they just would line up, wait up one more, they would get that extra 6 inches and they'd be in the kill zone all day long. And so I realized that we have this problem in fly fishing, especially with streamers and big foam bugs. We have this problem where people are like, well, you need a 9'5" weight, or you need a 3-foot glass, or a 3-weight glass, or a 4-weight glass, to really feel the fish, to really fight the fish. The problem is that you have to be able to deliver that bug at least 30 feet to be in a spot where you're far enough off the bank where the fish doesn't detect you, but you can still get it close enough to the bank where you can hunt them. And so there's got to be that sweet spot. And I think if we actually put duct tape over the weights, like if it said it was a 6-weight or a 7-weight or an 8-weight, we just put a little duct tape over that and nobody knew what the fuck they were throwing, that we would solve all of those problems, because I think it's a proclivity that people have that actually works against them. The other thing is that just like golf clubs, there are so many guys out there who think, I need steel shafts, right? And we all know that there are a lot of golfers out there that, yeah, whoever the pros are, sure, give them steel shafts, give them blades, let them play. Put steel shafts and blades in the hands of the average angler, we all know how that turns out. They would be better off with whatever, cavity backs. Either some guys can do stiff graphite, some guys can do regular graphite, some guys can do the senior graphite, whatever. It's the same with balls. You know what I mean? And so there are rods out there that have a little bit more of a mid flex that probably most people would be better off with 8 weights. Now that's if you're fishing with somebody like me who's having you out there chase looking for 22-inch brown trout, And so those are the techniques that we use, and that's some of the gear that we use. Number 4 question is, are there seasonal differences? Yes, very much so. I would say that when we are chasing big brown trout, the seasonal differences include they're hungry in the spring and they will show themselves in the spring. They're hungry. They've just come off of the winter. They're trying to put the feed bag on. That might be the time where you might jack your PB, your personal best. You might find that in the spring. Certainly as the water starts to warm up, they start to become more active. I have seen situations, and I know a lot of other guides have seen situations where in the early spring, maybe they'll chase, but they won't eat. But as you get into May, June, they'll start to eat more. But as the water warms up, maybe they're starting to look to go into tribs and get out of the big rivers. That'll happen. And then, the hopper bite. I mean, the hopper bite is magical. And the thing about the hopper bite is you have to be able to bring the high heat. You know what I mean? What's the old what's that? You can't be any geek off the streets. You have to know how to use the steel, or whatever that quote from Young Guns is, or whatever it is that's in that rap song. You just can't be any geek off the streets. I mean, what I'm talking about is, like, of course, I'm talking to people who angle. Okay. If you've never angled before, then I'm giving you something to shoot for. I'm telling you, get that Dixie cup up. Go buy your little combo that you can get for a couple $100 and practice, practice, practice. Put a chubby on the end of that thing, put a Dixie cup out 20 yards and spend all day long trying to hit that thing. You don't need to be able to throw 60 feet. You don't need to be able to throw 100 feet. You need to know how to water haul. You need to know how to at least single haul. Double hauling helps, but you need to be able to get that bug in a certain spot from 30 feet. If you can do that, then we can go out and we can hunt. Now, if you come with me the very first time you ever come, we'll figure something out, but we'll get you. There's a progression. We're going to learn a progression. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to keep you on a bobber for the rest of your life. Okay. I'm somebody who we're going to get you to learn how to fly fish and catch the kind of fish that I want to catch. That's just who I am. I'm different than probably a lot of other people, but I'm going to put you on a fish that that I am in that big, amazing Super Bowl all-star river looking for. And so there are seasonal differences. My books fill up in some of those seasons fill up more than others. All right. The question number five. Sweaty balls, I believe is Dusty Muffin. All right. We're going to get into top 5 favorite bugs. First one is top 5 favorite dries. Now, I break down top 5 favorite dries into 2 categories. I break them down into tradish and then foam. And so let's start with foam. Certainly the chubby is number 1. I don't like, in the old days they used to tie a lot of the wider chubbies, but now they're kind of narrower and a little more. Remember when the patterns used to be, they would have those little things you could punch out the patterns, and they were a little wider. I always trimmed them down, and now they're a little bit more rectangular. They're only a couple centimeters wide, and they look more like a golden stone. I think any of those chubbies that look like golden stones, I love, 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 love to skate foam. I love to throw foam at the bank and skate it back into the foam line as I'm throwing in a big mend, so that thing just cruises on down and fish on. So certainly a chubby is number 1. And certainly hoppers are number 2. Okay, fuck it. I'm just going to say it. I like the more or less hopper more than I like all the rest of the hoppers. So I would say I like, I used to love to say half chub and quarter chub and all that kind of stuff. Now people are always like, it's a micro chub. I like the half chubs. I like the quarter chubs. I think the bigger ones get fished too much, and so they're harder unless you're in a spot where, you're kind of in a mountain stream where there are a lot of cutthroat or fish of that nature. The bigger chubbies don't play as well, especially if you're on a river that's seen 8 billion of them. But that's not to say that some of these fish will not hit even a bigger giant, gargantuan chub that almost looks like a salmon fly that they haven't seen. I've seen that before. I've got a crazy story about that too. Hell, I might as well tell it right now. Okay, so I'm fishing this guy, and he's up from a fishing club up in Phoenix, Arizona, and he's got this giant fucking chubby, right? And it is as big as my finger, and it's got a beautiful gold belly. I like the gold flash on it, and he wants to fish it. And we're on the Missouri River, and I'm just like, son, right? Isn't that how the story should start? Son, this is the Missouri River, son. And I don't know if you know anything about the Missouri River, but it's technical. And when they ever tell you that the Missouri River's technical, you know what that means, son? It means it's hard as fuck. And there ain't a fish on here that's going to eat that big giant chubby. Not one. So I'll tell you what, you really want to fish that? You fish the bug that I'm going to give you. You catch a couple fish on that. We get a couple good pictures, and I'll let you throw that piece of shit. I probably said something to that effect, maybe not in that accent. So he puts on my bug I picked, the bug that I want to fish. He catches 2 or 3 gorgeous brown trout, just big fucking brown trout, beautiful casts in the right spot, incredible eats that I'll remember to this day. And so he's still I I have shown him how to catch these fish with this bug that I have, and he still wants to throw this giant motherfucking chubby. It's basically it's not as big as my finger, but it's big. It's salmon fly-ish, and it's late August. And he puts it on, and over 2 days, that fucking bug got ate 9 fucking times. That'll happen. And so I guess my point is that I like all of the chubbies. I like the dull colors. I like the bright colors. I like purple. I like all of them. It's just that there's certain sizes get fished so much. I like the Royal Coachman, Royals ones, Royal. I like all of them, but they just get fished so much in this state that at some point the fish get, the fish will start nosing them. And then you got to figure something else out. And so I like hoppers. I like the more or less hopper. I certainly like Jake from MFC, Jake Chutz. I like his no sink beetle. I like that a lot. And then probably, something like the Green River Ant. I like that. So maybe I only have 4 of the foam bugs. And then if we move to tradish, I think when you get into tradish flies, most people don't fish them because they're a little bit of a hassle. You got to grease them, you got to constantly be putting a little shake on them, that kind of thing. But if there's one bug in Montana that's a dry fly bug, and you want to learn how to dry fly fish like Brad Pitt and the river runs through it, and you want to do some shadow casting, right? I think if there's one bug, you could have a size 10, 12, 14, 16, and 18 purple haze, and you could catch every fish in the fucking river. Period. That's just it. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. And if you did need anything else, if you threw in X-wing caddis, a downwing caddis, maybe with a little fucking green sack on its ass, then you're going to pick up the rest of the fish that you didn't catch. And if you didn't catch all of them, you throw in a rusty spinner or maybe a comparadon, and that's it. Maybe an ant pattern, and that's it. You have those 5 patterns in your box: purple haze, comparadon, rusty spinner, downwing caddis, and an ant, and you're going to catch every fucking fish in the river, no doubt. Any of the fish that are going to eat on top anyway. And so I think those are the real dries those are all the dries you need. Other than, if that's different than, say, if you're head hunting on the Missouri. I'm talking about fishing on all the freestones. It just depends what you're doing on the, like if you're head hunting on the Missouri, then of course we're talking about, buzz balls and PMDs and, that kind of thing. And that's a little bit different, RS2s, smoke jumpers, that kind of thing. But those are all deadly as well, right? And so, so those are all my dries. Let's see here. I assume the next question is, what are my favorite top 5 streamers? And this is kind of a joke question for me. Like I said, I'm a streamer angler, and I'm a streamer guide. And I like to chase big brown trout with streamers. I like to chase bass with streamers. I like to chase pike with streamers. I like to chase carp with streamers. And so if I was going to chase a carp, I would use what everybody else uses, mohair leech. That's what I'd use. But for everything else, I always joke, like, somebody's gonna tell you, "Well, I like this, and I like this, I like so and so, I like this." I like, number 1, instead of saying, like, okay, so I'll give you the pat answer. The pat answer is, like, number 1, I like acrylics Clouser. Number 2, I like the mini sex dungeon, white and black, maybe olive, probably not olive, but white and black for sure. Uh, Number 3 is the peanut envy, mini peanut envy, again, white and black. I don't like to throw olive or natural. That's just not my thing. Then of course everybody's gonna throw in the sparkle minnow. Let's throw in the sparkle minnow. And then hell, I don't even know what number 5 would be. Probably let's just say the Fruit Loop for fun. I mean, they're all kind of similar, right? The butt monkey, or I like the butt monkey actually, or the whatever the Gallop one is that has the nylon head with the mallard on the head. I usually pull the mallard off, don't tell him. But I like that one as well. But the truth is, I do if I'm up against it and all of my bugs have not worked, I will throw a mini black sex dungeon. I think that I'll just ride that till my death if nothing that I want to throw is not working. And then close to that would be the black peanut envy. But really my top 5 are number 1, copper and gold Krelex. Number 2, silver and gold Krelex. Number 3, pearl and black Krelex. Number 4, pearl solid with silver Krelex. And then number 5, silver gold or pearl silver Krelex with deer head. Because I like a little flash. I like to see from the rowing seat. I like to see those bugs swim, and I love to see those big brown trout jack them. And I don't throw. We throw like homebrew, right? So we throw big bugs. We tie our own. All right. Question number 7. Top 5 favorite nymphs. Yeah, I know it's nymph, but I say nymphs. All right. I am not a nymph fisherman. I am not a nymph angler. I will never in my life ever, 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 ever throw a long leash nymph for a fish. I will not throw a bug that's 7 feet under a bobber or 9 feet under a bobber to 2 more feet under that for a fish. I just won't do it. I will short leash. I think short leashing can be fun. I think it could be exciting. I think it can be super active. I think if you're mending all the time, you can get that kind of Leisenberg lift where the bugs come off the floor. And I will do that. And if I'm doing that, I will just throw all the tradish shit, right? Sow bugs, soft hackle sows, pink bead, orange bead, sow, like a sow with a bead, a Ray Charles, with a bead, without a bead. I like the soft hackle. I'll definitely throw zebra midge, definitely throw, what else? Green machine, all of them. In the old days, I would throw a AMX or Bubble Yum, that kind of thing. But now, if I'm really up against it, I would rather just throw. I'd rather hunt the fish where I think they are, with a hopper dropper system, and I would just use a Perdigon. And if it's you know May, June, wherever, and the PMDs are out, I'll just use a Perdigon with a little crack back in it. I like that. I like the smaller one versus the bigger one. But I have that. I don't know if anybody's seen. I'm sure everybody's seen that one Perdigon, which is black and red. I like that dog a lot. There's one with a peacock collar that I like. And then if everybody's talking shit about this or that, I'll try it, but that's not really what I'm after. I'm hunting for fish that are not necessarily looking for the Perdigon first. And so I'm looking for, those are kind of bycatch for me. I'm looking to pick up a couple fish, maybe on the nymph, but I'm really looking for other fish that are looking for something different. And so that would be my thing with the nymphers. Uh, like I said, I started out as a nympher. Way back in the day when I was 4 years old, I was throwing worms. Okay, are we still here? Okay, we're back. Something happened. Maybe my my mic didn't like me laughing so hard. All right, we're gonna have a little taste of the mellow corn. All right. Number 8. Question 8 is side pieces. Other rivers you love to fish with clients. I would say that for me, there are various places on various reservations, Indian reservations, that I like to go to and take clients, but only when I work with tribal outfitters. And those are things I don't necessarily talk about on the internets. Give me a call. Okay, question number 9. One bug for the rest of your life. So I don't think I can do that, but like I said before, I think if I had to have one bug for the rest of my life, I think a size 10 purple haze would be okay. I think if I only had to skate chubbies for fish for the rest of my life, that would probably be okay. And if I had to only throw a gold and copper Krelex for the rest of my life, that would be okay too. But I think of all of them, the funnest would probably be hunting big fish with chubbies, skating chubbies. So that's my answer. Even though I don't fish a lot of chubbies, for me personally, that would be the funnest. All right, number 10. What is a day like in your boat? And what does the perfect day look like? So a day in my boat looks like a perfect day in my boat is we are hunting all day long. The thing you learn about me is that when you're fishing with me is that you are dialed in and you're not just praying and spraying. You're not casting out into the wild blue yonder. You're trying to get that bug into very specific spots all day long. And the way to do that is every cast is bottom of the ninth, bases loaded, full count. And you are trying to get that bug in a very specific spot because that's where that fish is. That fish is in a place where it feels the safest. That fish is in a place where nobody else can get to it. So I need for us as a team to get to it. That doesn't mean that when we're going down the river, we might not be having a few beers. We might be. That doesn't mean when we're going down the river, we might not be talking about the history of Montana and how beautiful the day is and all of the coolness of Montana. We very well might be. And we also will probably be listening to some very cool alternative country like Sturgill Simpson and Tyler Childers and Charlie Crockett. But we are going to be hunting our asses off. Now, if you're a brand new angler, you're not going to be in that situation. You and I might be on a spring creek somewhere, learning to cast and catch 10-inch brookies, which is a beautiful, amazing thing. Or we might be on a little 2-lane highway river where we're skating bugs for 10-inch cutties to come up and eat. If you've never fished before, we might be doing that. But if you are an angler who's been in this game for a while, we're going to go out and we're going to be hunting for your personal best brown trout. And to be that, we are going to be in the game as long as we can and as hard as we can. And we'll pull over, we'll have a little lunch, and then we'll punch the clock back in and we'll get back after it. Okay? The last question is what should they bring? Just bring yourself and a raincoat. That's what I would bring. All right. So we have finished part 2. And That one's empty. So let's move on to this one. So this one is the Pina Colada. Wait. The Pina Colada Berg. It's a sour. It's a pineapple coconut sour, and it is from Odd Pitch Brewing. The thing about me is I only drink Montana beers, period. I don't drink anything else. I will not fucking touch a PBR. I will only drink beer from Montana. All right. Act 3, number 1. What is your nickname? My nickname is Bane. My father was named Urban Bear Don't Walk. And like I said, he was the third Native American attorney in the state of Montana. Montana only has 1 million people, fourth largest state. He was known in this state for his work. And so when Junior showed up, Junior didn't like to be called Junior. So I got lucky. My college friends at Montana State started calling me Bane or Bane, and I just took it on as my name. So I've been Bane for going on almost 30, 40 years now. And so that's who I am. I'm Bane Bear Don't Walk. And then there's kind of a side question here. It says music, and that means yes. I love all kinds of music. Of course, I love all kinds of music. You look at my Pandora, and there could be, one of my stations is, of course, my stations, like I say, are alt country. It's kind of funny. Somebody was listening to real country the other day in the boat, and I didn't know any of the new songs. That was crazy to me. Because, I mean, if I know every single country artist pre 2010, I know every single word, every single lyric, every single artist. But there's these new ones, and I've never heard of them, and I don't know any of their music. But I do know Sturgill Simpson. I do know Jason Isbell. I do know Charlie Crockett. I do know Tyler Childers. All those cats. And so I listen to a lot of that. One of my stations is if I'm feeling down, I'll put on the Public Enemy station and listen to a little old school Public Enemy rap. And I also listen to I hate to say this, but I like some of those big singers like Adele and stuff like that too. Sia. Okay, I'll never say that again. All right, question number 2: weed and or whiskey? I wish I could smoke weed. Montana is a weed state. I wish I could smoke it. It does not work well with me. It kind of turns me from a liquid to a solid. And if you're ever in the boat with me, I'm wild and crazy. And it just makes me kind of turn into a solid stick of butter. I wish it worked better because I would really like that, I think. I do love whiskey. I like to collect bourbons. That's why I have this one. One of the most sought after bottles on the planet. I just got this one because I wanted to try it because it's got kind of a cult following, but I do like whiskey. But more importantly than that, I like Montana beers. And Montana is the second state in the nation in terms of breweries. We have more breweries per human than all of the states in the union, except for Maine, I believe. So, and I love all of the Montana breweries. All right. Question number 3: favorite bar, brewery, eatery, that things in Montana. So I love Draftworks in Missoula, Montana. That's probably my favorite brewery. I love to eat at the Driftwood in Cascade, Montana after a day on the river. Cascade, Montana is still one of those cool little fucking Montana towns. It is not any of the big towns that have exploded into, what we are post Yellowstone, post COVID, all that kind of stuff. Cascade, Montana is still one of the coolest little motherfucking towns of all time. And the Driftwood Bar has one of the best burgers you'll ever eat in your life. We still have great coffee shops. We have great breweries. We've got great eateries. People think Montana, I hate that fucking term Montucky. People think that because you move here and you can shoot guns, that we are not a fucking cultured people. Let me fucking tell you, you will probably not find smarter, more interesting, more cool, more fucking verbalized people than you will in Montana. A lot of good motherfuckers here. All right. Number 4. Let's see here. What's your favorite post day on the river story of a fellow guide after a night of hitting it hard? You know, the only story that comes to mind right off the bat is my buddy Kevon, former ski instructor. Him and I and Cliffy, who is also they're Cliff and Kevon are both still ski instructors, and they're both fly fishing guides in the Upper Flathead, and they'll be on the show. Cliffy, I, and Kevon went over to the Missouri to fish, and it was on St. Patty's Day, and Kevon started at either 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., and he was drinking something called Black Death, I believe. It was some maybe Irish beer, and it was St. Patty's Day. It was March 17th, I believe, and on the half hour, he hit the bong, hit the beer every half hour for 12 hours. And at about 8 p.m., we're coming into the takeout, and we all have sunglasses on, and it's kind of dark because the streamers were flying in all sorts of crazy patterns at the time. And we end up going to the Oasis in Wolf Creek. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Oasis, at some point, Kevon gets kicked out of the Oasis. And if you know the Oasis, the people who run it can be some of the have had harder life stories than most of us. And so to get kicked out of the Oasis is like a real fucking score. And I just remember going to check on Kevon, and he was out on the patio, and there was a dog, and him and the dog were barking at each other so loud and so fast and so often for like 15 minutes. So that was a pretty fucking huge score. Oh, it says, what is your craziest, funniest client story? You know, I've got two. I think I've got one friend who, goddamn, every time we got on the boat, it was this really hot gal. And every time we got in the boat, she'd have to take a shit. It wouldn't, like, we'd be somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and she'd be like, oh my God, I got a fucking shit. We'd be out on the river, and she'd be like, I got to. And I just remember one time calling a buddy FaceTime with me FaceTiming him with my head, and then over my shoulder, you could see her face poking out of the weeds. I don't know, man. I'm the kind of guy who takes care of that before we go out. But I think the craziest story I have is one time I went with this guy who was like the self-proclaimed greatest fly angler of all time. And we're out, and we're on the Bighorn River, and we've got the hook out, the anchor's dropped, and we start to like, and he's a big guy, and he's in the back, and we start to the anchor gets hooked on a rock, and all of a sudden the boat starts to take on water from the back, and I'm yelling at him. I grab a knife, and I'm yelling at him to take the knife and cut the line to let the anchor go. And this self-proclaimed greatest fly angler of all time, guy was probably 6'5", 260, kind of a badass. He goes into a total fetal position. He just goes. And so I have to jump over the back seat, jump over him, and cut the fucking line. I think that's maybe the craziest, weirdest story I have off the top of my head. All right. What's the most embarrassing thing that you've ever done in front of a client? For sure. I was putting in the boat one time and we were kind of on a steep bank and I did not put on a bow line and it was during runoff and I took off the hook from the winch and I let the boat head down the trailer into the water and it took off. It fell out of my hands and it shot straight into the middle of the fucking river. I had to re-mention that it was during the spring. It was during runoff, and I had to go swim after my boat in runoff in the spring when the fucking river was going full tilt. I think the shittiest part about that was I had 2 cigars in my front pocket, and they floated away. All right, number 7. If you could guide a famous person, who would it be? And follow it with the famous fuck person game. Okay, if I could guide anybody who was famous, I would totally want to guide Emma Stone. Shout out to Emma. If you're out there, come to Montana, I'll guide you. And then the famous fuck story is basically, you know that story like my partner's always like, I would sleep with so and so. I'd sleep with so and so. And I'm like, I don't play that game because if I had a chance, I'd sleep with the girl down at Starbucks. All right. Number 8. How do you feel about social media ruining spots? Honestly, I think it fucking sucks. I'm going to have a fucking drink of whiskey on this one. I got a quick story. I was at a party in a little town in Montana, and a guy was telling me about a spot. Cool dude. Jeff Evans. Shout out to Jeff Evans. And he was telling me about a spot. And then his buddy came up, Sarge, and Sarge, we were talking about this spot, and I'd never been there before. And I remember going to look for it. And I remember I parked in a certain spot. I jumped in the river. River was a little full, going full tilt. I start marching up the river to find this place. It's fucking hot. And it's humid. And there were fucking bugs and mosquitoes everywhere. So I'm fighting the current. It's hot. It's humid. And there's fucking bugs everywhere. And I am just like struggling. I get up to this place that they had been talking about. And it was a little river. And there are no fucking shit 3 giant 18-inch brown trout skying in the air eating March browns. Just fucking jumping out of the water 1 to 2 feet eating March browns. Like fucking Valhalla. Totally. And I get in a position that maybe, size 10 purple haze, maybe I catch one of them. I think in my memory I caught all 3, but I at least caught one of those fucking fish. And this was pretty early in my fly fishing career, and it meant a lot to me. And so I now know that some motherfucker could just show up to that place and hotspot it. You could just fucking tag that motherfucker on whatever. I'm not going to shit talk any software. I don't like any of them. I don't use any of them. But they could just put a pin right there. And I also know that I took the long way around to this spot, and there's probably a closer way. And I know that somebody could fly in, rent a car, drive right to this spot, and have no fucking adventure doing it. I have a story of a lifetime and a memory of a lifetime going and looking for this spot. But if all of the fucking honey holes are on XYZ fucking software, and all you got to do is fucking jump in your car, rent a car, and drive straight to them, then what the fuck's the point? You know? So I am not a fan of hotspotting. I am not a fan of treating this sport in a way where it takes all of the adventure out. If all you're after, if you've never fished before and you want to get in the boat or you want to go fish and you want to catch a fish and catch it and get a grip and grin and feel that exhilaration, fuck yeah. First fish I ever caught on a fly, it took me 6 weeks to catch a fucking fish on a dry. And the first one I caught was 6 inches, a 6-inch brookie that I was so excited, I jerked it out of the water and sent it 15 feet down the stream. If that's what you want to do, we've got that for you. But if what makes you feel good is shooting fish in a barrel, quote unquote, shooting penned up elk, that's not what this is about. This is about something way fucking different than this. It's about the hunt. It's not about the catch. And the harder the hunt, the better. And so what I feel like is that social media is taking that away. Now, when I see social media with all of these people giving lessons and trying to make money off of it and doing all this stuff, yeah, it wrangles me a little bit. But I also like to see all the people in the sport because I also know that, yeah, some of my places are getting crowded. But I also know there are so many places out there that nobody's touching because humans tend to do what I call the parking garage rule. You go into a parking garage at a big city, at a mall, and there'll be like 8 billion people milling around the first floor looking for a fucking spot. Then you go up to the second floor. There's still quite a few. But then you go to the third floor. Oh my God, there's fucking spots up here. And then you go to the fourth floor and there's fucking like 2 cars up there. And all you got to do is hit the fucking elevator and ride it down. You're in the fucking mall. And that's how it is in Montana. The fancy, the superstar places, super packed. But if you fucking are willing to do a little adventure, and that's what this should be about, then this place is fucking Valhalla for sure. And there is so much more to it. I mean, we don't even know about, I'm not even going to I'll probably get fucking shot by somebody from Alberta if I say, well, if he went up there. But anyway, separatists and everything. All right. Number 9. What's your fly fishing hill that you would die on? All right. Here we go. The minute you throw that sink tip line in the water and the boat starts moving, it stops sinking. Okay? So if you're a streamer angler and you're throwing sink tip or sink line and you're in a boat, the minute the current or the boat moves, or if you're a smart angler, you move the bug immediately, it stops sinking. So what that means is that you've thrown the sink tip or sink line to the bank and you need to immediately move that bug. That bug needs to move immediately to catch that fish. You're not letting it wash. You're not letting it sink 4 feet because the current's going to take it or the drag of the boat's going to take it or you're going to move it yourself, right? You're going to walk the dog. And now you have 20 feet plus of line 1 inch under the water that you now have to bring closer to the boat to recast. Okay? And so when that bug comes within 5 feet of the boat, no fish is going to hit it there. So you're covering more water this way instead of covering more water this way. Now, if you're using that sink tip for accurate casting, so that all you got to do is do one water haul and throw it to the bank, one water haul and throw it to the bank, one water haul and throw it to the bank, I get that. But if you think that bug for any reason is getting lower in the water column because of your sink tip or your sink line, it doesn't work that way. And now you got to work 10 times fucking harder to bring that fucking line closer to the fucking boat so you can jerk it out of the water because it's all underwater than a floating line that's sitting on top of the water that you can just pick up and throw, pick up and throw, pick up and throw, pick up and throw. It's just food for thought. All right, number 10, and then this is it. One thing you wished someone told you before your first day as a guide. Huh. I'm going to change that up a little bit. What is something you wish somebody had told you when you were getting into fly fishing? What's the thing you wish people had told you? I would say, I believe that the best fly angler in Montana is the one with the most diverse miles. And what I mean by that is, if I sit down and talk to somebody about XYZ stretch, there are probably, of course there are 100 guides who do that same stretch every day, wherever it is in the state. But there's always one guy who, if you're like, hey, have you been to XYZ? Have you been to this one? Have you been to that one? Have you been to this place? Because we all want to know, right? That's the great thing about Montana, is that allows us to, and that's the point of this fucking podcast, is that we're not going to have, I don't want to have like a bunch of dudes who like show up from North Carolina in a fucking bus and fish the fucking like top 6 rivers in Montana, make a movie, and then fucking boogie out of here. And they're the ones who tell our story. I want to tell our story. And I want our story to be known as is that we have more fucking fishable water than anywhere else in the lower 48. Maybe even Alaska, because Alaska has such limited access. And we have more fucking fish that you can fucking go after. We have more fish that there are so many, like you can have a 6, 7, 8 species day on on all these rivers that we fish, and there's you can target all sorts of different fucking sizes. And the stories of our people, of Montanans, that's what this podcast is about. And so I wish somebody would have told me on my first day, go out and fish as much of this fucking water as you can. Yes. Fish the beaverhead and go stand in that water and tie those fucking weird ass rigs that they throw where you spend fucking 5 hours just tying those rigs breaking them off and tying them again. Go to the Madison and fucking figure that motherfucker out with fucking all those anglers. Same with the fucking, the Horn or the Upper Flathead. You know what I mean? Go fucking check it all out. But then go fucking see all the shit that's out there, that there's so much of, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles of Montana rivers, and go fish them. So that when you're ponied up at some cool fucking bar in Montana, and there's hundreds of them, and somebody says, hey, somebody you trust, somebody you like, somebody you want to talk to, somebody who just bought you a gin and tonic, hey, you ever been to this spot? You can be like, yeah. I put in here, I'd walk to here, I'd do this, then I'd go fucking get some food and a beer here. That's the cool shit. That's the cool shit. And we are so fucking lucky to have this as our backyard. The last of it is going to be what I call the $100 tip. Bane's $100 tip is the thing that'll help you catch more fish than you possibly could ever imagine. And I'm going to ask every single guide and every single outfitter, what is their $100 tip? And if you're ever in my boat, and this will separate from people who want to be in my boat and people who don't, if you can get that bug one pubic hair off the bank, then you're in the game. And if you can't, you're not. I used to have a fucking guide friend who I would fish with all the time. Everybody called him Sensei. And I'd throw it as close as I could to the bank, be an inch off, 3 inches off, 4 inches off. And he'd always say, you're out of the game. Start again. I'd throw it again. Fucking, I'd be like 2 inches off the bank. You're out of the zone. Throw again. So I'd throw it again. Sometimes, I'd be 6 inches. Oh, you're out of the game. Throw it 6 inches off the bank. There's a microcurrent. It's right off the grass. It's right off that rock. It's one fucking pubic hair off the bank. That's where the fish are. Peace.